And we're live. It's Dr. J in the house with Dr. Eric Balcavage. I have Dr. Eric here. He's from Pennsylvania. He's a functional medicine doctor. Sees lots of patients in the areas of thyroid, gut health, functional medicine, big area. So we're going to dive in today into all these different topics here related to this. So excited to dive in. Dr. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And we put Dr. Eric's link in the description. So if you guys want to reach out, see what he's up to, schedule a consultation, get more support from him, there'll be a link right in the description below here. So feel free and check that out. So Dr. Eric, excited we connected. I got a thyroid book out, thyroidreboot.com. It's my Amazon books out there. So thyroid's a near and dear topic to me. I have autoimmune thyroid Hashimoto. So I had to become an expert for my own self to really get to the root cause. Tell me about how you got into the thyroid area of functional medicine. Is it an area close to you personally? Or?
Well, it is now, but I didn't get into it initially because I had a thyroid condition. I got into it because somebody else got diagnosed with a thyroid condition and was told that, as a 28-year-old female, you have you have hypothyroidism, you've got iron deficiency and fibroids. So we'll remove we'll do a hysterectomy. We will put you on iron and we'll put you on thyroid medication. And that's how we're going to take care of it. And so I got a phone call that said, hey, you got to help fix this. And my background was medical technology before I went to chiropractic school. So I got to figure out how to help a family member. And that led me into studying functional medicine, finding Tatis and studying under him. And then,
yep. Karazian, you mean?
Yeah.
Dr. Karazian? Yep.
And, cool. Unfortunately or unfortunately, through the process of helping everybody else, doing training and triathlon training and 4 hours of sleep a night and lots of work and doing things, one day I did my blood work just to see how healthy I was. And turns out I had Hashimoto's and glucose resistance. And
for you had it too as well? Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, I had to look at myself and say, what the heck is going on? I think I'm doing everything right. But, when you take a deeper look, sometimes it's these foundational things that we aren't doing as well. And those are the things that trigger immune related disorders many times.
So when you first found out you had this issue with Hashimoto's, were you educated about functional medicine yet? Did you go to the conventional medical doctor, endocrinologist yet?
No, I was already 12 years into
so you already got it. So you already understood, okay, I know what to do. I know what areas to look at. Because I just find patients that go to their conventional endocrinologist, they won't even look at those antibodies. And when they do, there's not really much they do. They're not going to put them on biologics or steroids. Those medications are too strong and have potential side effects. So conventional medicine doesn't even really acknowledge that. And just curious your take on why that is.
Well, I think they have a different job than we do. I mean, they're trained to provide thyroid medication once the gland has become dysfunctional and can't produce sufficient thyroid hormone anymore. And so they don't, most of them assume what we assume, that it's an immune driven condition. We're not going to treat the immune system. Our job is not to identify what it is.
Correct.
Our job is to manage the disease. So we measure two markers, TSH, free T4. If TSH is high and free T4 is low, we provide T4, and their job is to manage TSH. It's a different job. There's a lot of people that are unhappy in that model, but we can't, that's their job. That's their model. That's their training. And so in the beginning, I was like, why wouldn't they look at all this stuff? But I soften at the longer you're in it. After 30 years, you go, this is their job. I got a different job than they do. I evaluate things differently. My job is to help somebody recover from a thyroid condition, not manage their TSH and T4.
I think a lot of patients, they come in, they think, well, my medical doctor went to Harvard, went here. They must have access to all of the cutting edge information, right? So if they didn't tell me about the things that you're telling me, it must not have been important. I think people can deduce, or let's just say push some of this functional information out because they just think, well, if it was important, I would have got it. And I think a lot of conventional medical doctors, at least early on, feel that way too. Like, oh, well, functional medicine, if I didn't get it in medical school, then it must not have been important. Thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, what's often taught in medical school is what's in the books, right? And so what's in the books is what was valid, maybe a decade or 2 decades ago, and not what's the cutting edge research. It takes about 10 years for today's research and findings to actually make it into a textbook and potentially
even longer, I think.
So, the endocrinologist is trained in a certain way and they're taught a certain model and they're so busy doing management that they're many times don't have the time to dig in deeper or have the time to really dig into what the most recent valid research is to explain what's going on.
Yeah, and I think also too is you have allopathic medicine being very focused on pathophysiology. They're focused on the disease and then managing the symptoms of the disease. And when you see a functional medicine doctor person, they're looking at underlying physiology. They're looking at where it's not functioning well and what we can do to upregulate physiology. Those are two different things, right?
Right.
If I
That's
have a
why I
headache,
say they
because
have
I'm,
two
yeah,
jobs.
yeah, they're two different jobs. And I tell patients out of the gate, I'm not anti medicine. I'm just pro root cause. And a lot of times, if you focus on the underlying, if you focus on treating the symptoms, it's very easy to ignore the underlying root cause. Case in point, I bang my head against the wall every day, but I take ibuprofen to cover up the symptom. The root cause is I'm banging my head against the wall, right?
Mhm.
So you want to look deep at that. And that, any functional medicine issue has some kind of chronic inflammatory, maybe even an autoimmune issue. The gut's at play, nutrients are at play, detox is at play. If you ignore any of those things and just provide the drug that inhibits whatever that pathway is to control the symptom, that underlying cause just gets bigger and bigger and worse and worse over each year.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. But again, we have a different job.
Yep.
You're going into an allopathic physician's office. You have maybe 10 to 15 minutes that you're
Correct.
going to spend with that physician.
If that.
And what they're going to do is they're oftentimes just going to say, what are your symptoms? Here's what I can give you to manage that. If there's labs, and I'm not in every doctor's office, but I would venture a guess that a lot of physicians don't even actually look at the labs.
Correct.
Their staff person says, hey, everything looks good. They walk into the room, labs look good. How are you feeling? Oh, you got, okay, they say you got high blood pressure, everything else looks good, so you're healthy, we'll just give you a blood pressure medication, see you,
That's
and come
it.
back. But that's unfortunately that's the model. That's why we have a healthcare or disease care crisis in
Correct.
this country. And
Correct.
the solution for us, and at least when I got into functional medicine and left allopathic medicine and came more to chiropractic and functional medicine, I was more angry because I was angry at what I left because of my health conditions at the time, and functional medicine changed it. So you have anger towards the other profession, and it kind of makes us a bit jaded and hard to work with the other side. But they're all good people, and essentially just like we're all good people, we just have different jobs. And really what we need to do is learn how to communicate together for the benefit of the patient and say, hey, that's your job, this is my job, let's work together. If we need meds to manage a sign or symptom or condition, we'll send them back to you. But otherwise we're going to try, and if the patient wants restorative recoverative care, functional medicine care, send them to us, right?
Correct.
And let's work
Correct.
together to try and get the patient better.
I do find most patients that are seeing with me, but they're still working with a medical doctor, there's a genuine lack of curiosity on the medical doctor side when patients I work with get better. I find that. And I think part of that is maybe they feel hamstrung because of the standard of care. People don't understand, but your conventional doctor has a standard of care they have to work in. And if they don't, their medical board can sanction them. Maybe insurance won't cover them, right? And so there is that component there. But I find a genuine lack of curiosity. I see that a lot where patients get better. I'm like, so what did your MD say about that? What did your endo say? No, nothing. I'm like, and I've asked that question hundreds of times in my 15-year career, and that's just been a commonality. Every now and then you see doctors that step up, and those are the MDs that are like, hey, I've been in this field 10, 20 years. I'm going to go get functional medicine training. I'm curious. I'm stuck because I know this patient isn't getting better by just throwing them on Synthroid. Yeah, their TSH is better. That's a good thing. Good check in that column, but they still have all these issues. And now I'm referring them out for a psych eval, antidepressants, or just saying, hey, they're aging. Now what?
Yeah. I I think a lot of clinicians are just too busy. They don't know what's going on. And many of the
Yep.
clients that are turning to functional medicine are probably some of their hardest, most difficult, problematic
Yep.
patients because they're not getting well in that model and they're getting edgy and anxious. I would say when maybe I'm in this 30 years at this point, so maybe 20 years ago, I used to get more pushback and shove back from clinicians when they realized I was working with their clients. I really don't see it too much. Many times I'll have the clinicians actually join us on a discussion because I'm explaining to the client and the clinician, hey, the patient's inappropriately medicated. Here's why based on the labs. And walk them through an interpretation of labs, which is totally different than what they're used to. They're used to reading labs for H or L on a lab report, not interpreting labs. And so when you say, hey, look, here's why this is inappropriate. Their TSH is normal, but it's suppressed by inflammatory markers. You weren't able to run the inflammatory markers. I did. And because I ran the inflammatory markers, we know two things. The TSH is normal, but it's inappropriately normal for the person sitting in front of us. The patient has hypothyroid signs and symptoms. And when we run a more complete panel, which again, your guidelines don't allow you to run, you can see that their TSH is normal and their T4 is normal, but their T3 is low, or their T4 is low, and their conversion's poor, and maybe their reverse T3 is elevated, and they don't need more thyroid medication in this situation, but they have a thyroid condition. It's not glandular yet, but it's a conversion issue, a tissue issue. And the
Yeah.
patient is complaining. They're not nuts. They're not crazy. They don't need anxiety medication or antidepressants. What they need is a strategy to identify why they can't convert the T4 to T3 and have low T3 in their cells and tissues. And if we address that, we may prevent them from having the gland issue to begin with. If they're on medication, kind of lay out why it's too much medication in a certain situation.
Okay, so let's talk about that. I see most conventional docs tend to always, underdose. That's kind of been the general thing I've seen, where their TSH may get back, below 2.5 or 2 or 1, but T4, T3 downstream's all low, or they're not using a full spectrum glandular like an ARMR or an NP or a WP. So when you talked about the inflammatory mediators suppressing the TH, are you talking about antibodies? Are you talking about different interleukins or cytokines? What are you referring to more? Can you go more deep into that?
Sure. So when you have inflammatory mechanisms going on, and that can be on a general blood chemistry panel, you can look for things like CRP and homocysteine and elevated ferritin
Yep.
and fibrinogen and uric
Yep.
acid as indicators of inflammatory states. If we run immune panels, especially in a patient who's got an immune driven, or we believe has an immune driven condition like thyroiditis, we can look at the Th1, Th17 elevations or changes in those types of cell populations, and we know they're going to release cytokines. And they're probably, especially Th1 and Th17, are going to produce a bunch of cytokines that are going to influence the peripheral conversion of T4 to T3.
Got it. So you're looking at some of these kind of immune markers, these cytokine, interleukin immune markers, like general like Quest Lab, LabCorp kind of panels.
Typically, if we're going to do immune panels, I'm looking at typically like Cyrex Labs is for their immune
Cyrex.
panels. I think they're probably one of the premier immune testing sites,
So you're looking at
labs.
the general Th2 balance with those interleukins on each side, cytokines on each side. If one's
You're
overly
looking
high
at,
or
yeah,
low.
you're looking at what the lymphocyte T cell population and natural killer cell populations are. And if Th1 level is elevated, that's going to be more pro-inflammatory. If it's Th2, it's probably going to maybe more anti-inflammatory, and maybe more antibody producing on that
On the
client,
Th2.
on
Do
the
you see
Th2
more
side.
Th1 dominance with Hashimoto's or more Th2?
Oh, Th1.
Yeah.
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 Those clients tend to be more Th1. You'll see more Th17 elevations, especially in people who
Yep.
have mucous membrane inflammatory mechanisms going
Right.
on. And the cells that tend to, especially based on the literature, it's the CD8 cells, cytotoxic CD8 cells, that likely create most of the damage. A lot of times we talk about antibodies and how important they are. They're really not as important as everybody makes them out to be. They are an indication that there's potentially thyroiditis, but a lot of people have thyroiditis, no antibodies, but they're Th1, maybe Th17 dominant, and they're not going to produce as much antibodies.
Yeah, about 10% will be seronegative. Then you may see it with these cytokine markers being out of whack. You may see it with an ultrasound, with just inflammation, right? The thyroid's inflamed, but they're not making an antibody to it, right?
Yeah, I'd say even it's probably way higher than that. But we're probably not evaluating everybody's uh, lymphocytes,
Right.
right? So we're evaluating a very, very small population of people with a T cell pattern and what's going on. So yeah, they may be running those types of panels in a conventional model, on patients who are really struggling. But I've in since the Cyrex lymphocyte panels come out, I don't know how many. I've done tons of these tests, And the vast majority, say 80% of the people that come to me with thyroiditis, whether they've been diagnosed or not diagnosed with Hashimoto's at some point or another, are Th1, Th17, or CD8 dominant, or a combination, not
Yeah, because
Th2.
you have that CD4 to CD8 ratio, right? And so typically it's the CD8 dropping, right? That CD8 to CD4 ratio, it's the CD8 dropping.
No, if they have the CD8 cytotoxic CD8 cells, if they're elevated, those CD8 cells are what are going to infiltrate all these cells can infiltrate the thyroid gland themselves, but those CD8 cells are going to be binding to tissue, to the cells, and then releasing their granulozymes and destroying the cells. Um, but not always CD8 positive, but usually it's a rise in the CD8 cells in many cases.
Right. Right. And then what about that conversation you had with the doctor? So you had the conversation about all these inflammatory compounds. You talked about the CRP, the ferritin. You talked about these interleukins and cytokine panels and homocysteine. So how did the conversation go? Were they receptive? What was the next step?
Yeah, most of the clinicians that get on, maybe there's a little bit of why I don't understand why you would say this. I've normalized the TSH. Why do you think it's different? And when you open up the panel and show them more and kind of show them some of these things, and then you say, and our client is frustrated. They don't feel well. They don't function well. And based on my my research and what I've been doing for the last 30 years, here's the recommendation. And my suggestion is we make this change, retest the patient in 30 days. We'll run a thyroid panel, a lipid panel, just to make sure that not only do we see a positive change in the thyroid panel and their signs and symptoms, but we also see at least one tissue indicator of a positive change in thyroid physiology. And if the change was inappropriate, we go back to what you were doing. If it's not inappropriate and the patient's feeling better and the labs show it's better, then we'll continue to work through this process. And that's usually,
Yeah,
they're like, all right, we'll give it one shot. And then once we give it the one shot, they're like, oh, yeah, they're feeling better, they're functioning better, and okay, what else? What else do you need? And that conversation keeps going.
that makes sense. What other factors can impact TSH? So obviously, if you have low thyroid hormone because your gland has been beaten up by your immune system, that's a thing, right? You have to address that because that tissue over time can lose its functionality in producing thyroid hormone. Other things like cortisol and other nutrients and blood sugar and insulin. What are the big factors that when you see this TSH looking normal, but we have downstream lower T4 or low T4 to T3 conversion, right? T4 being more inactive, T3 being more active. What are the big things that you see kind of clinically that are the big barriers?
Yeah, the biggest things that are going to create a inappropriately normal TSH is excessive stress on somebody's physiology, number one, right? And so when we think about excessive stress, we think physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, microbial stress, mindset, like the whole load. Once somebody starts to have an excessive level of stress on their physiology changes from homeostatic regulation to allostatic regulation. That triggers cell defense mechanisms, inflammatory mechanisms. We're going to get an increased conversion of T4 to T3 at the hypothalamus, and that's going to start to lower TSH inappropriately in many cases, because as the TSH drops, we're going to see a reduced T4 and T3 production, and that's going to translate to symptomatology. Is the argument is that normal? Is it appropriate? Or is it inappropriate? Is it abnormal? Is the person broken? I think it's an appropriate response to somebody who's under a more acute or chronic stress response. If you look at things like the cell danger response, when somebody's feeling threat and danger, or the level of stress on their physiology exceeds their capacity to make energy to manage that and everything else they need to do, physiology shifts. We get a down regulation of the conversion of T4 to T3 in the cells to kind of slow down the less important systems in the body, in the cells, the tissues in the body, and a shift in energy to ramp up the cell defense mechanisms. And part of that is to wire the brain, increase flow to muscles and tissues, and
Correct.
down regulate digestion, down regulate sex hormone regulation, detox, and all these other things. So early on, that stress response will suppress TSH. And this is even somebody who's
Correct.
not on a medication or anything. But I would say that that's the primary thing
Hmm.
that's probably driving a low or inappropriately normal TSH
Hmm.
um, when somebody has hypothyroid signs and symptoms.
Yeah, I would agree. That's why you see lots of studies with ashwagandha being helpful because it regulates some of that stress response. When you look at some of the people that come in, what are the big stressors? I mean, you're starting with food. Are you starting with just emotional stress? Like, what does that intake look like? And how do you prioritize the stressors that the patient's showing for?
Yeah, so it's a great question because that's to me, it's not sexy. Like everybody really
Yeah.
wants the
No,
magic supplement and the
I agree.
magic dose of thyroid medication that's going to fix them, and it doesn't exist. If it did, they probably wouldn't come to see me. Probably wouldn't come to see you.
Yeah.
They'd get the dose of T4. They'd have great conversion of T4 to T3, and they'd be happy. So it doesn't happen a lot. But I initially I have patients. In my book, The Thyroid Debacle, we talked about 10 different of what I call fitness factors, different aspects of somebody's life that can either help them be healthy or can contribute to some of their stress load. So we talk about dietary fitness, sleep fitness, respiration fitness, emotional fitness,
Yeah.
habitual fitness. And I've since expanded that to about 18 different aspects. So I'll have patients kind of complete that questionnaire at the start because what I want to know is what are the biggest influencers that at least today they're willing to admit are contributing to the excessive stress load. And as you know, not everybody's willing to admit their deepest, darkest elephant in the room that's contributing to their biggest stress load. Sometimes it's their relationship with their spouse, their family, their kids, their work. Um, but those are the things that we need to take a look at. And so oftentimes I'll take a look at that and say, okay, here there's the foundational things that are important. And then these are the other things that we need to work on. But the big things, mindset's huge, especially anybody who's been chronically ill. If they're telling themselves on a regular basis, I'm sick, I'm unhealthy, I don't feel good, I'll never get over this, my body's attacking me, it's going to be hard to get them better. So mindset's important. Physical fitness is one of my foundational. Dietary fitness is one of those foundational. Sleep and their habits. Like, what is this person doing from the time they get up to the time they go to bed every day? And how is that helping either improving their health and well-being or sabotaging their health and well-being? So I look at all those aspects, the five foundational things first, and then I look at their overall chemistry that I have available and say, okay, based on what's going on here, we got to work on these diet, lifestyle, and fitness factors. And at the same time, we've got here's all the systems. And I think what's important for me to explain to them is the the state they're in. You think you don't know these two states, but there's homeostasis and allostasis. You may think that we only run in one system, so I'm going to heal. If you just give me that supplement, it's going to work the way I want it to. But supplements that we take, the medications we take, work differently based on the state we're in. So I need that person to understand that they're not broken, their immune system's not trying to kill them. It didn't wake up one day and forget that their body was theirs. Instead, the body's trying to protect them from something, and it's a perception of fear or danger, and it's in this fitness factor load that we have to address. And then here's all the systems that are becoming dysfunctional as a result of being in this chronic stress mode.
Hmm.
The adrenals are being downregulated, detox is being downregulated, guts being
Yeah.
downregulated, sleep. And so those are the things we need to support to help recover, and there's a strategic way to do that, as you probably well know.
Yeah, when I see patients, like you kind of mentioned it earlier, like hey, isn't that sexy? I tell patients, hey, we're going to build this beautiful mansion for you, but we're going to start off just grading the land and digging a big hole and putting some concrete in and calling it a foundation. It's not that sexy. We're not building the swimming pool or the master bedroom yet, but we're starting there because everything that sits on that has to be on solid ground,
Hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
comments on that?
I think that's where we need to start.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, depending on where somebody's come from, if they've come from an allopathic model and they don't know really what functional medicine is, we have to almost retrain them. Like, I know there was a pill for every ill in that model. That's not necessarily what we do over here. Here we have to address the root causes and deal with the foundational things that you're going to have to do no matter what if you want to get healthy and recover.
Yeah.
If they've come, and we see this, this is my perception is I think it's great that a lot of people are coming to functional medicine, especially from an allopathic um, medicine model. The problem is they're bringing their philosophy with them, and that dilutes what we do in functional medicine. We've got to do a better job guarding the gate. It's great that more people come to functional medicine,
Right.
but what functional medicine isn't is a pill for every ill, but we just use a different pill we call a supplement. That is
Correct.
not functional medicine. So I think you're right. What we do when we really truly do functional medicine is we have to be engaged with the client to help them understand it's what you want is not going to be found in a bottle or a pill or a capsule. It's going to be found in helping you improve diet, lifestyle, and behavior patterns, and using those supplemental support to kind of get you to health faster. But it's not, the supplementation isn't the tool, it's a tool, and it's a support tool, not a primary tool.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, when I see patients out of the gate, the first thing we look at is we're looking at their food, right? We want to make sure the nutrient density is there. We want to make sure anti-inflammatory fatty acids. We want to make sure they're stabilizing their blood sugar, right? We're not on this blood sugar roller coaster, because that can be a big thing that throws off the immune system too. But conventional medicine doesn't really acknowledge diet as an issue. They kind of write off nutrition by just, hey, if you count calories and the calories are good, that's fine. But it looks not at the inflammation or the nutrition part of it. And so I find that as a big pattern too. And then also we have foods that can throw off the immune system. I mean, most people know about gluten and its impacts on Hashimoto's and maybe dairy. What are some other foundational things that patients coming in that first intake that you see? Maybe it's the same thing. What other things like that are throwing patients off?
From a dietary standpoint,
Yeah, diet or just the foundational things that you see out of the gate that are glaring. Maybe it's sleep, maybe it's too much exercise, maybe it's too sedentary. What else
yeah,
do you see?
I think it definitely goes back to those foundational five things. A lot of people, because they don't feel well and function well, um, aren't doing anything physically. They're not moving on a consistent basis, and that has such a negative impact on it. The other part is that, and we see this a lot in functional medicine, the person who's trying to optimize everything, they're trying to biohack everything, they're the athlete. And it's what happened to me is that we do excessive amounts of exercise
Sure.
with limited amount of recovery, and we train in our 40s or 50s like we are in our 20s, like we still have the same recovering capacity. And a lot of the patients, they're on one end of the spectrum. They're either not doing anything, and we got to get them moving because that'll help so much their gut biome. It'll help with glucose regulation, it'll help them with sleep, it'll help them with detoxification pathways, moving lymph. Or we have the other extreme where the person is
Hmm.
excessively exercising, many times under calorizing because their metabolism's been compromised, and they are they think that the solution is just to do more instead of realizing what they really need to do is actually calm down and do less. And that's a shame. Sleep, critically important. And when you don't feel good, you don't function good, it's probably
Yep.
hard to sleep. And what do? You wind up getting on Instagram, social media, this stuff, and spend countless hours looking at how awesome everybody else's life is and not yours. And then you start internalizing that. And that in itself creates some challenges with sleep and behavior. Mindset's key, as we said before. You've got to believe you can get healthy. And I think one of the worst things we do, especially with people with thyroid conditions, is tell them that your immune system's attacking you. That's a terrible thing to tell somebody,
Hmm.
because if their immune system's out of control and it's attacking them, that sounds like a no-win situation. So instead, we need to change that discussion with somebody and say, listen, your body's not broken. Your body didn't forget how to convert T4 to T3. It didn't forget how to regulate your guts or your gut or your hormones. It's just not the priority right now. The priority is protection, and the priority is defense. And so we've got to identify and address whatever the body is trying to defend you from. And if we don't do that, everything we do is a management strategy and has a
So we
limited
get
benefit.
so we get the fight or flight response better. Maybe we're looking at the adrenals. Maybe we're making some diet and lifestyle change. what are some of the big things, big factors that patients are doing or not doing that is exacerbating their autoimmunity, increasing their antibodies?
Well, I would say besides those first things we talked about, I mean, from a dietary standpoint, um,
Big foods, big toxins, big things in the gut. Anything specific that you see that just kind of come to the top of your head?
from my patient base, I think the biggest thing a lot of people doing that's problematic is they're taking way too much supplementation,
Mhm.
and they are trying, or they've been taught that if they optimize their T3 levels with T3 medication, that they are, or they optimize their sex hormones with hormone replacement therapy, that's going to fix them. So they are overloaded in supplementation. I think a lot of the clients that come to see me, they're doing a pretty good job with eating a cleaner, low processed food diet. I think most of them are doing a pretty good job from an environmental toxicity standpoint. I think the biggest challenge I see is that people are way over supplemented and they're way over medicated. Those are the two
Mhm.
biggest things I see, hands down.
Yeah, when I get patients in out of the gate, the first thing I focus on with patients, I focus on hydration, electrolytes, and just helping them to digest their food. That's the foundation for me. I work on
Mhm.
that, and then we're making diet and lifestyle changes. So I do agree. See patients come in with 10, 20 different things. It's like, where do you start? And then it's kind of this pressure of like, all right, this person was like drawing this picture, take over with their colors, their supplements, their protocol, and finish the picture, right? It's like, no, no, no. We're going to start with this blank slate and we're going to build up slowly. Thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it is part of my dietary fitness process. We talk about sitting down to eat, chewing your food, right? When to drink, what not to drink. Hydration fitness is a piece of it. So that's all a piece of it. But a lot of people do come to us because they've probably been to 6 functional medicine practitioners already by the time they get to me, and they've already got a list of 25, 30, 40 bottles of supplements they're taking, and they want to know what's the one thing I'm missing. And usually the first strategy is we're going to go back to foundational basics. I want you on a whole food based diet, low processed food diet. Obviously we want to see what they're doing and what's currently worked, because they probably have some input to give, but we want to make sure that that's there. We want to make sure calories and macros are balanced for what their burn rate is and their metabolism. But we also, usually I'm like, okay, one of the first things we got to do is eliminate your supplementation. And that's sometimes, for some people, that's an easy thing to do. They're like, okay, I'll quit tomorrow because I don't know if I'm noticing a change. And then other people are
Mhm.
fearful that if they reduce um, or eliminate their supplements, they're going to get worse. And usually my discussion is, if you need 30 supplements to feel this terrible, you don't need any of them. So let's start from
Right.
zero and let's
Yep.
do supplementation as a strategic strategy, a few things at a time, see how they work, and then eliminate them, and then layer things in, versus let's just add. I mean, I think the the record patient that came to see me so far was 140 capsules a day plus lotions and powders.
Oh my God.
So, how do you have time to, or
Live.
room to eat? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Oh my gosh.
cost, I think that was one of the things that the spouse was most happy about, was the amount of money they saved just in monthly supplementation.
Wow. Wow. Good points on that. So, a couple of questions for you on that. You hit a couple of points I want to nail. So, when you see patients coming in, I know it's going to be individualized. You're going to do a workup. You're going to look at patients as an individual. You're going to dial them in. What are some of the big supplements or nutrients that you find patients benefiting from? And again, I get it. Just because you're listening doesn't mean you take it. What do you find things that people are missing and that help move the needle or help push the physiology in a better direction? So, top three. And then I want to know why you think it's helpful.
Well, if I had to give somebody like some starting things that may be important, I would say, as a general foundational thing, a digestive enzyme for most of our clients is going to
Yeah.
be really important.
Mhm.
Um, and typically, I'm leaning towards something with a little bit higher lipase in the vast majority, because
Yeah.
they've got fat malabsorption issues, and we want to help them digest their food. If you're in this cell stress, your parasympathetics are down regulated, you're not making stomach acid, digestive enzymes,
Correct.
bile flow is compromised. So we need to help them digest their food better. So that's number one. Number two, if I had to give a general overview, is something to help manage but not suppress inflammation, because inflammation in itself isn't bad. So that could be, depending on the individual, maybe something like a systemic enzyme to help break down some of this inflammatory stuff a little bit faster. And then I'm a huge fan of creatine as a
Mm-hmm.
tool to help
Mm-hmm.
with energy production. We have to keep in mind that when somebody's under cell stress, if they have reduced T4 to T3 conversion, their mitochondrial function is not gone, it's down regulated. It's part of the adaptive response. But it takes a lot of energy to make phosphate donors, make creatine, so that we have phosphate donors for ATP to make energy. And so creatine is one of those things that we can take that can provide the phosphate donors for somebody who doesn't make them well, that can give them a little bit more energy boost
Mm-hmm.
and help them feel a little bit better. And there's very limited downside. And the plus side is because it's so energy dependent, 40% of methylation, I think, goes to make creatine. And so if we can give them an end product, creatine, that means they've got 40% more methylation that can go do so many other things in the body versus giving them a bunch of B vitamins and methyl donors that they may not be able to tolerate to begin with. And I'd say if there's one more, I'm a huge fan of, for a lot of people, with electrolytes and potentially some additional magnesium, because chronic stress, and many of these people, because they don't make good energy, they have cellular dehydration. They wind up drinking excessive amount of water many times and just peeing that out in minerals and magnesium back out. So those would be the things. I think I cheated and gave you four versus
Yeah.
three.
So we had what, the enzymes, we had magnesium, we had creatine, and then was it an anti-inflammatory? Was one of them? Was it
Yeah,
curcumin or
so we said
turmeric?
digest it. Yeah, you could do something that's going to be something that's going to manage the inflammatory response. So it could be sulforaphane, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
Um, it could be just a systemic enzyme for somebody who's
Yeah.
got chronic, like serratia peptidase or
Serpeptidase,
lumbrokinase, or
lumbricanase,
yeah,
yeah.
yep,
Nattokinase, yeah.
yep.
And you mentioned the creatine. I like that, right? Because you're boosting ATP production. You get it from protein. There's a lot in protein, but if you're having a hard time breaking down protein, plus like the amount of 10 grams of creatine, it would take like I think dozens of pounds of meat to get it. And so
Mhm.
if you already have malabsorption, then you're kind of supercharging right all the phosphate donors. That's going to bump up ATP, which is going to help cognitive, mental
Mhm.
fatigue. It's going to help your cells stay hydrated better because creatine kind of pulls water into the tissue too. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah. So foundationally, those are things, but then after that, like everything is, as you know, as probably well know, it's who's sitting in front of me. I don't have a traditional, like, oh, I do this for 30 days, that for 30 days, this for 30 days. That's, you do that when you're starting off in functional medicine. You go to a conference and you learn, oh, here's the 30-day gut protocol. You do this, then you do the 30-day detox protocol, then you do this. That's great for everybody to learn and to start. But once you're into this for a number of years, you go like, okay, we're not protocol based. We want to look at the big picture. What's the mechanisms, or what are the support products I can provide that are going to create the biggest bang for the person's buck?
Like that. Very good. So a couple other questions here before we wrap things up. What do you see in regards to the gut impacting things, right? We know 80% of the immune cells are in the gut.
Mhm.
Gut permeability or leaky gut, so to speak, can be a big driver. I mean, conventional medicine has kind of rejected that thought process for a long time, but people are starting to come around to that more. There's lots of research on zonulin and SIBO and the enterocytes and all the gut permeability things. Um, where do you think the gut plugs in, and how important of it is a factor in addressing chronic thyroid issue? Because people think, well, this is a thyroid issue. How does my gut play a role?
Yeah, the gut plays a massive role, because there is, if there's dysbiosis in the bowel, if there's inflammation in the bowel, if there's permeability in the GI tract, even if there isn't permeability, there's a direct lymph connection from the GI tract to the thyroid tissue. So you can definitely have issues going on. When there's dysbiosis, when there's inflammation, when there's tissue damage, there's release of what we call DAMs, danger associated molecular peptides, PAMs, pathogen associated molecular peptides that get into circulation that activate the immune system. But there are what they call pattern recognition receptors on immune cells that allow them to say, oh, that's the thing we need to go get. Okay, I'm activated. Let me go kill that thing. Oh, that's the tissue that's getting damaged. Let me go clean that up or go to that tissue. But it's interesting, and through my research of trying to figure out what we might be missing from this thyroid perspective, because I was really struggling with the idea that the immune system just attacked the thyroid gland willy-nilly, like, oh, it's just going there and destroying it for no reason. Didn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense for why it's easy to get people better. But the thyroid cells themselves have these receptors for damage associated molecular peptides and pathogen associated molecular peptides. So when these danger particles are higher in circulation and they get to the thyroid gland, the literature seems to show now that can actually activate the thyroiditis and trigger the damage to the thyroid gland. And
What's the name of those peptides again? So these peptides are on the thyroid, and when they get damaged, it triggers. Repeat that again.
They're called pattern recognition receptors, or toll-like receptors.
Oh yes, I know. You're talking about in the gut right now.
No, on the thyroid gland. So if you
because I know they're in the gut too. I know they play a big role with gut permeability.
Yeah, okay. But they're actually, they're on immune cells, right?
Okay.
They're actually on thyroid cells as well.
Okay.
And once they bind, then you get the change in the histocompatibility complexes. You get activation and release of the thyroid cells themselves actually become immune-like and release inflammatory molecules that actually activates the local T cells. So it takes these naive T cells and turns them into active T cells, and releases chemotaxins that actually attract more lymphocytes into the thyroid gland. That triggers the damage. So when you have gut issues, inflammation occurs. That affects everything, creates systemic changes as it starts to get more complex. That starts to change conversion of T4 to T3, because it impacts the deiodinases, the things that convert T4 to T3 or increase the deactivation. Those inflammatory molecules can also trigger the changes up in the brain where we get increased conversion of T4 to T3 and upregulate the sympathetic nervous system, further dysregulating the gut. And then we get a cascade of changes. So the gut plays a massive role in triggering thyroiditis. It can play a massive role in the conversion or lack of conversion of T4 to T3. And it can be the thing that continues to ignite immune dysregulation that not only causes thyroiditis, but creates a whole host of other immune conditions as well. So those things are tied. And with anything in functional medicine, we learn in a very linear model. Like, this is the GI tract by itself. We kind of silo all the different organ systems.
It's the biggest problem.
Difference for anybody listening between allopathic medicine and functional medicine is, I have to know, when I look at a thyroid panel, I don't want to just look at your thyroid panel. I want to look at everything else at the same time, because I know the thyroid physiology is impacting your glucose regulation. I know it's impacting your liver function and your mitochondrial function in the liver. And we know it's impacting your lipids and the ability to get lipids into your adrenal glands to make your sex hormones, or into other tissues to make into hormones. So we can't silo these things down. We have to look at the big picture. So if you have gut issues, it impacts thyroid physiology, or alteration in thyroid physiology eventually is going to start to impact the system globally.
Yeah, it's the biggest reason why conventional medicines don't have a hard time really being successful, because they are isolated, right? Allopathic medicine, they're all siloed into their individual systems. And if you're an endocrinologist and you're just looking at TSH or even T4, how do you fix the gut issue? Because technically you got to refer that off to the gastroenterologist. Or how do you fix the brain fog? Oh, you got to refer them off to the neurologist. And what are they going to do? Provide gabapentin, or, what are they going to recommend? They're kind of stuck.
I guess they would argue with you that they are successful. Look how busy we are. Look how many people we see. Look how much drug sales are up.
Yeah.
So that is success. If you look at how much money is spent on medical care, right? And how much money they make as an individual, how much the hospitals make, how much the pharmacies made, that is success in that model. You're talking about a different model of,
it's a different yardstick.
Success,
it's a different yardstick,
right? You're looking at not the patient just being managed into optimal ranges. Like, because somebody might say, well, they have high blood pressure. I gave them one, now two blood pressure medications, and I've that's success. I think you would probably agree with me. That's not success from a health. That's not health success. That's disease management, right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be success in my book, but we have different yardsticks, different metrics that we're using.
But it's amazing though, that metric will change. If you jumped in any of their Porsches with them and they had a check engine light pop up and they were like, "Oh my God, my check engine light's on." I'm like, "Hey, here's some painter's tape right over that check engine light. Look, it's fine. It's gone, right?" They'd be like, "Well, no, I got to go to the mechanic. That light means something deeper. I got to look under the hood." It's like, now you understand what we're thinking about.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Listen. I agree with you, but
Yeah,
you know,
no.
that's what we're dealing with. Like, and
I
there's
appreciate
good
the
people in that model,
I
right?
appreciate you playing the devil's advocate because it's good for people to understand what people on both sides think. Because it's that contrast in thinking allows you to figure out, okay, where should I go? Where's the better fit for me? So I like that. I think that's good.
But I think we have to do that, right? We
Yeah.
have to educate the patient. What is it that you want, right?
Hmm.
If so, somebody came to me and they said, I just want my T3 to be in what somebody says. Somebody told me that my free T3 needs to be between 4 and 5. That's what I want it to
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
Okay. Is that all you? Is that what you want? Yeah. Great. Take T3. You can get it there.
Right.
Okay, but
Right.
I don't feel good. I tried that. I don't feel good. Okay.
Correct.
Then what you want is to recover your thyroid physiology. Is that better answer? Yeah, that's what I want. Okay. Well, that's not about the medication as much as it is what's causing you to have this chronic health issue to begin with. That's what we need to
Correct.
address. Oh, I don't want to change diet and lifestyle. I don't want to. I don't want to do that. I just want my thyroid numbers to look good. Well, then go see somebody who prescribes medication, because that's what you're going to need, and you're going to need to see a bunch of different people over time, because the longer you don't fix the thing, and you said this right at the start, the longer you don't address the root cause issues, the bigger the problem gets, because you're in this kind of allostatic regulation longer and longer, and more systems break down, more systems become dysfunctional. And so, but if the patient wants thyroid recovery and they can get it, if you have Hashimoto's, you can recover your thyroid physiology. I've got
Right.
patients that do it all the time. If you don't want it, if you can wind up taking less medication and no medication in time. Your thyroid gland can recover for most people, but you have to do the things and address the things that you need to raise your level of health, to reduce the excessive stress, so that the immune inflammatory process down regulates, the conversion improves, and then your gland can finally heal and recover. Then your gut will heal and recover, and you don't need chronic use of gut repair powders. You don't
Right.
need chronic use of adrenal support, because your adrenal physiology isn't under constant stress
Correct.
and strain.
Very good. All good points. I like how you mentioned the toll-like receptors. I think that's important, right? Because they're signaling or they're picking up the bacteria, the virus, the dysbiosis. I think that's great. The danger signals. I like that. Is there any way you're actually assessing that? Are you looking at like just the TNF alpha or the interleukins that they may produce as a result of their signaling? How are you assessing that, or are you? Is it more just philosophical?
No, I think that piece of it, that idea of it is in literature, that, hey, these
Yes.
things happen, but we're not really have a way to really directly measure it. So it's more theoretical at this point that this can happen. Um, but we
I think
don't
the
have
biggest way to
enough
look at
studies
it
of
would
it.
be I think the biggest way to look at it would be they do produce TNF alpha and interleukin 6. So if you ran an immune panel and you saw that higher, you could potentially surmise that. Um, but I
Yeah.
appreciate that perspective. Mhm. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean and there are a lot of tests we can run, but in my work and doing the research and thinking about what's happening with a lot of these clients and pulling a lot of the research together, you start to say, okay, what are the mechanisms? And when you start to look at the literature and the research, you see that, hey, some of these things make way more sense, and we have some documentation of this now as the science gets better, that, hey, the thyroid cells themselves, there's actually a paper that came out, because it's been my belief that thyroid physiology is more of adaptive response in most cases, and but there was nothing real. There wasn't a lot of stuff to necessarily to justify it. Even Dr. Navio in his paper on the cell to aging response talked about all the other nutrients and what they do under low stress situations and what they do under high stress situations. And I said, what, you don't have thyroid physiology here. And at the time, he's like, Eric, I'm not a thyroid person. I don't really, it's not really what I do. But that led me down that path, and then you start to do more work and study the stuff, and then I was like, man, this is an adaptive response. And then you read what happens when you put too much thyroid hormone into a system that has potentially cells developing inappropriately, and the challenges that may occur. And I think it was 2019, a paper came out talking about the increased incidence of cancer, all different types of cancer, overall are generally higher in people on thyroid medication 5 to 10 years down the road. And there's now more papers coming out showing that hypothyroidism is a protective response against cancer. So when you think about that, you go, wait a minute. If this is a protective response, is it just a protective response against cancer? Is it a protective response against bacteria and organisms? And then you see these mechanisms like, oh, the thyroid cells have these pattern recognition receptors, the same thing that immune cells stuff. We can start to put these things together. I'm actually in the process of finishing a perspective paper to send off for publishing on this whole adaptive thyroid model.
So what are you looking at from a functional range to say, hey, you're probably taking too much thyroid hormone? Is it T3 at a certain level? Is it a combination of suppressed TSH? What's your kind of sweet spot and what's your danger zone?
So I look at the whole panel to begin with, plus some
Sure.
other labs. But if I look at
Yeah.
TSH, definitely if there's a suppressed TSH, but the key is we want to make sure there's appropriate levels of T4. If the person is just on T4 only and they are likely over medicated, TSH probably below 1 in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you see these. I have one that came in today, 0.005 for a TSH.
Yeah.
So if it's a TSH suppressed, where's their T4? Where is their reverse T3? Where's their T3? And what's that free T3 to free T4 ratio? What's that conversion look like? If they have higher reverse T3, they have the higher reverse T3, lower T3, and the free T3 to free T4 ratio is low. We need to get that medication reduced. And the big piece of that is because if you have too much T4 in circulation for the state they're in, that T4 that's not getting into the cells, it's not being transported into cells, not only can it bind to cells that are endocrine receptors on cells that are not developing appropriately and create problems, but the excess T4 in circulation then results in ubiquitation of deiodinase 2, which means they're going to have even less conversion of T4 to T3. So there's this idea that more thyroid hormone is going to automatically translate to more T3 inside the cell, and that's not necessarily the case.
What does that word ubiquitation mean? I haven't heard that word before. What does that mean?
So ubiquitation essentially means turn off an enzyme. So it marks it for destruction.
So the deiodinase enzyme is what cleaves off an iodine molecule to activate the T4 to T3. And so it decreases that enzyme function.
Yeah. And that enzyme is based on from signaling mechanisms. And one of the signaling mechanisms that either turns on or turns off deiodinase 2 is how much T4 is in circulation.
Okay, that makes sense. And so the sweet spot is you don't want T4 going above what? 1.5, 1.6?
Free T4?
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely don't want free T4 probably over 1.5, 1.6.
What about T3 free?
Free T3?
Mm-hmm.
As far as high or low? Like
too high and or too low?
Well, from a too high perspective, I would say it all depends on is this a person who's on thyroid or T3 medication or not on T3 medication?
They're on thyroid medication. They're doing all the right things, functional medicine wise, all the principles. but they're trying to fine tune their dose, but maybe they've gone too far. What's that dose look like if they've gone too far?
So I don't know what it's going to look like directly from a thyroid panel itself. Okay.
Hmm.
We got to look at their signs and symptoms. I would say the average person's probably, when they're in a more optimal range, is between 3 and 4.
Hmm.
What their T3 level, or T3, free T3, total T3, free T3 is going to be, is going to also be dependent on when we're testing them and the medication they're on. And
Yeah.
so that becomes critical. If they're taking T3 medication, we need to know what type of medication. Is it slow release? Is it regular T3? Is it a glandular? When did they take it? If they took that T3 medication, let's say 3 hours, and that's probably, if we want to see how high the T3 brings the medication brings their T3, we probably want to have them take their T3 before their blood draw, about 3 hours before their blood draw. And then we know how high that T3 is getting, because that T3 is going to peak somewhere around 4 hours, 5 hours, in that range. And then it's going to subside as the day goes on. So if that T3 is 5 or 6 within those first few hours, and then I look over at the TSH and that TSH is being suppressed, then I also have to go over and look at the T4 levels and the T4 medication they're on, because what happens in the person who's on, let's say, NP thyroid, who's trying to ratchet up their T3 to get it in an optimal range, and that we can have a discussion what that even means, is that the glandular products are typically at a ratio of like 4-to-1 T4 to T3.
Yeah.
That's not how we regulate T3 in the body, T4 and T3 in the body. It's usually on average somewhere around 13-to-1, but it could be as high as 18-to-1 down to as low as 5-to-1. But on average, let's just say it's 13-to-1. So you're getting more T3 as you're ratcheting up your thyroid medication. That excessive T3 is going to start to suppress TSH too much. And if you're not fully replacing T4 medication with your NP thyroid and you're suppressing the gland, you start to lose thyroid gland contribution of T4. And now we can start to sink their T4 levels. And then that can have an effect on T3. So
Yeah.
it starts to get complex.
Yeah. And myself personally with patients, I've been recommending for over a decade that patients take their thyroid support and then wait about 3 hours to test, because I want to see whether T3 levels are at peak. I think most doctors conventionally have just taken the Synthroid instructions, which T4 has got a 4 to 5 day half-life. And so they take those instructions. And if you're on NP or Armor, they say, hey, don't take your thyroid support before. It doesn't have anything to do with it. The half-life's too low. But if you got T3 in there, it does matter, because 50% of your T3 is gone in 8 to 10 hours. And so most of the time in 24 hours, if you haven't taken it, it's not going to be in your system. So you're not getting a window into it. And then also, I always find that taking it twice a day is by far better. You get just a much more even keel of it, even level throughout the day, versus, you get a big drop by 2, 3 in the afternoon. There's a 50% drop typically, according to the
Yeah,
data. That's the patients with that.
I think most people would be better. It would be better on a split dose. But I think what happens with most people who wind up on glandulars, they typically wind up taking too much. And my suggestion for the vast majority of the people after doing this for so long is, if you feel you need T3, if the thyroid gland, to replace what a thyroid gland would typically make, let's say we've removed the thyroid gland
Are we talking
completely.
T3 within the T4 glandular structure, or are we talking T3 by itself?
We're talking, if we had a gland
Yeah.
on somebody, completely
Yeah.
removed it, right?
Yeah.
We might need, let's just say, about 100 micrograms of T4 to
Yep.
replace what that thyroid gland would make. And then they might need, the thyroid gland typically makes between maybe 5 to 10 micrograms we
Yep.
need to replace it. So
Correct.
why are we giving anybody more than the 5 or 10 micrograms that a healthy thyroid gland would make? And when we start to give the glandulars, it starts to increase that dose, unfortunately, because as you increase the dose, it is more thyroid hormone than a gland can make. And the argument by some people is that, well, we want to give them more to optimize their T3. But if you think that their body forgot how to convert T4 to T3, then optimizing T3 makes sense. If you believe, like I do in most of these cases, if you give them 5 to 10 micrograms and they still have low T3, and if they don't have a gland and you're fully replacing T4, you should be giving them that 5 to 10 micrograms of T3. But if they still have low T3, that is the optimal state for that person. That is the
Hmm.
optimal level because their body is adaptively down regulating it. Yes,
Unless they're
you
just not
can
absorbing
provide
it too.
more.
Unless they're just not
Oh,
absorbing it.
yeah, but if they're absorbing the T4, the T3 is even more absorbable than the T4 based on the literature,
Right. So
right?
assuming the T4 is being absorbed, right?
Right? Because the T4 is like somewhere between 50 and 70% absorbable, and the T3, based on the stuff that I've read, is like 90% absorbable.
Hmm.
So I get it. You might need a little bit more, but like that's the sweet spot. We see people coming in. I have people coming in, they're on 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 micrograms of T3 along sometimes without T4, sometimes with T4. I've got a woman, I just looked at her lab. She's on 120 milligrams of NP thyroid, and it's inappropriate for her. Her 15 hours after her last dose of NP thyroid, she ran her labs and sent them to me. Hey, this is 15 hours after I took my meds. Her total T3 was 170,
Oh
and
my gosh, that's really high.
her free T3 was her free T3 is actually it was like 3.1. And you would say, well, that 3.1 is good. Why is that low? Well, the reason it's low, the other part of the story is she's also pregnant. So HCG is in there, and that's creating some issues
Progesterone.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly.
But but somebody's treating her and saying, hey, we need to ratchet this up. And they were doing that before she got pregnant. It just so happens in the middle of the
Yeah.
conversation, she wound up getting pregnant and delays to get the labs done. But we have to be careful. We think that more thyroid hormone, more T3 is going to optimize the labs, and there's people in our space that's their claim to fame, and that's okay. But I get a lot of those patients that are just over medicated. If you take, I don't have a beef with T3. I don't have a beef with it. If you feel good, you function good, you're great on whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But what I see come to see me are people who are on they're trying to do higher and higher doses of NP thyroid or Armor because the T4 didn't work and they can't get their T3 level up. So they're doing NP thyroid plus T3. They're doing NP thyroid plus T4 and T3. And you're like, wait a second. If there's reduced conversion, stop trying to fix it and start asking the better question, which is what functional medicine should be,
Yeah.
which is why is the person not able to convert and get that T3 to 100 or the free T3 into the threes or the fours, whatever somebody thinks is the optimal range. But I think that's where sometimes it gets overblown. And it initially, I think it's like heroin, or not that I've ever done heroin, but you get that hit at T3 and you're like,
You
that
are.
feels good. And look at my lipids went down. Right. Because the liver is highly dependent on T3 from the bloodstream. So it'll change that marker and it'll change some things, but it's also going to create an issue because we think that only T4 is getting deactivated in that inflammatory state, but T3 is getting deactivated too.
Correct. That makes sense. Anything else, Doc, you want to highlight?
No, I think that's it.
Oh,
I think we
I
had a
want to.
great discussion.
No, I think it was great. One last thing though, iodine. Just give me your take on iodine. Obviously, there are a couple of camps out there. People are recommending super doses and the very high milligram levels. People like Brownstein, people like Karazi, like, hey, just keep it, at the RDA 150 or so. What's your take? Again, assuming someone has Hashimoto's, they have antibodies. What's your take on when and how to dose iodine?
I evaluate for it. I look for it. My biggest issue is I don't think doing supplemental iodine for me makes a lot of sense for a lot of these people because a lot of them, they're not deficient, at least when we can measure them.
How do you measure them?
There's a couple different tests out there. You can do a 24-hour urine collection. ZRT's got a test that supposedly matches that, so which is easier for the client. So I like to look at blood. I like to look at urine as well.
Do you do a urine with a challenge?
I don't do the challenge. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't do the challenge because you only need one client to do a heavy dose of iodine and flare them up, and you're like, all right, I'm not going to do that. So I know there's people that swear by it, and I know and I've talked to both camps, and the camp that says everybody's deficient and the camp that says everybody is overloaded. I think it's probably, for the vast majority of people, it's somewhere in between. There definitely are some people that are deficient And again, we have to ask why. Why are they deficient? Is it because they're just not eating iodine-rich foods? And especially the people like on anti-inflammatory diets, those are the people that we have to be a little bit, maybe sometimes more concerned about, and where they live and those types of things. But um, with almost every micronutrient issue, it's not as simple as, oh, you're deficient, just take more. It's usually, okay, but why am I deficient? Is it because I don't eat the foods that have it? The foods don't have it. I can't digest it. I can't absorb it. I can't assimilate it. Or because I'm under cell stress, I'm not taking iodine to the thyroid gland under this stress condition. I'm shifting iodine to immune cells to try and kill whatever this bug is that I'm in threat from. So I think it's a more convoluted issue. But if I see somebody who I think has an iodine deficiency pattern, then I'll definitely take a look at iodine and the factors that may influence or impact its absorption.
Awesome, Doc. Well, I really appreciate it. Guys listening, this is Dr. Eric Balcavage. His website is drericbalcavage.com. If the spelling is off, just go to the description below here, and there'll be a link for you to go right to his site. He sees patients worldwide, right, Doc?
Yep.
Good. Awesome. Appreciate the conversation. Anything else you want to leave listeners with?
No, if you need some more information, just go to the website, follow me on Instagram, or listen to my podcast, Thyroid Answers Podcast, which I think we're going to get you on in
Yeah.
a very
Love
short
it.
period of time.
Love it.